Hey everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. Cool stuff to talk about today. Today is one of my favorite days to teach. Get to talk about the Battle of Frericksburg and the Battle of Chancelorsville. And you're probably like, yeah, there's no way that's going to be interesting. Oh, it is. You're going to like it. All right. One thing in a previous lesson that I should have talked about them, but it can be thrown in anywhere. Very important to understand. Whenever you hear these stats get thrown around about the Civil War, there absolutely were black soldiers in the North. 100%. Escaped slaves. Slaves that were freed through the contraband concept with the Emancipation Proclamation absolutely were encouraged to go join the United States military. Keep in mind, slaves, when they were freed, when the Northern Army would come through and would free them, all right, under the contraband concept of the Emancipation Proclamation that we talked about, that they don't really know how to go get a job and earn money and things like that. So having the United States military there where they can join, be provided 3 meals a day, is a very enticing concept. By the end of the Civil War, 10% of the entire United States military is freed slaves and African Americans. There was no that I have ever heard of, and if you know of a story or can provide me some documentation, I would love to have it, because this is an absolute statement. There was no slaves that fought in the Civil War for the South. There was not, because people are like, well, you could just have your slaves go fight in the Civil War if they're so short on soldiers. Yeah, slave is the most valuable commodity there. Also, whose slaves are you going to send? The rich people ain't sending their slaves out, and they're not the ones fighting. Poor people, they don't have any slaves that they can make go fight. So that was never a thing. There were no slaves or black people that I am aware of that fought for the Confederacy during the Civil War. If you happen to be able to prove me wrong, please do and let me know, and I would love to educate myself on that. But I don't know of a single story where that took place. All right. So with that being said, let's talk about some of these battles today. And it gets bonkers, which is how Mr. Wagstaff likes to teach. All right. So we're on the Battle of Frericksburg. Let's get over here to where old Lincoln is. I'll make myself super small here so I can put myself over here on Lincoln. And make myself a little bigger. There we go. That'll work. All right. So the last we left off, McClellan was in charge. Well, then he fought at Antietam, and even though he won at Antietam, he refused to follow Lee back down south. So, guess what happens to McClellan? He's fired. And also, as we have mentioned, guess what else McClellan's doing right now? Now he has been fired. He's actually been removed. McClellan, he gone. He's running for president against Lincoln, all right? And it don't look good. It don't look good at all for Lincoln, because McClellan's saying, elect me and we'll be done with this war altogether. Lincoln is terrified of this because it's getting up close to the election in 1864, and the North hates it. The North blames Lincoln for the fact that this war is still going on, that it ever started to begin with. So the South and the North both hate Lincoln. Lincoln's probably one of the most unpopular presidents we've ever had while he was president. All right? So Lincoln's like, oh, this is a silly problem to have. I just need somebody to take 100,000 men and march them from Washington, D.C. directly down to Richmond and take it over. I don't want somebody that can overthink this. Just somebody that takes their troops, march them down to Richmond, take over Richmond. So he looks at his bench here. Who's he got left? Moron, coward, and crazy dude. Crazy dude right now, he's at the end of the bench rubbing chocolate all over himself. And Lincoln's like, why are you rubbing chocolate all over your... That is chocolate, isn't it? That does not smell like... Oh my God. And crazy dude's like, just being crazy dude into the bench. And Lincoln's like, oh God, what is wrong with you? No, don't make eye contact with me. So his choices are coward and moron. He don't need them to be smart. He just needs them to go straight ahead and take over Richmond. So, guess whose time it is? Moron's time. All right. So moron's name is General Ambrose Burnside. All right. This is a picture of General Burnside. All right. This is an actual, they didn't have color cameras back then, but sometimes with the technology we have today, they can take the black and white pictures and they can colorize them of what they should probably have looked like. So that's what has been done here. General Burnside, if you notice these sweet mutton chops he has here, this is a very unique style. Like nobody else had this. The term sideburns for the hair on the side of your face literally comes from this guy. So at some point they switched the term Burnside to sideburns, and that is a term that comes out kind of for this hairstyle, like growing out your sideburns. It literally comes from a Civil War general, General Ambrose Burnside. So his quote here I have for him is, "The habit of declaring sympathy for the enemy will not be allowed. Persons commit such offenses will be arrested with a view toward being tried or sent beyond our lines to the lines of our friends." He's like, I'm a no mercy kind of guy. So, all right. So I like to do a caricature of Burnside. Like, all right, what you want me to do, Mr. Lincoln? And Lincoln's like, all right. Mr. Burnside's like, yes. Lincoln's like, all right. I just need you to take some troops, go down to Richmond, and take it over. And Burnside's like, okay, I go now. And then like just heads out, and Lincoln's like, oh, okay. I mean, he ain't a rocket scientist, but he should follow orders. So let me bring up my little clicker here. So Richmond, it's right here. All right. Right here is Washington, D.C. Burnside is just going to go a straight beeline. It's right down to Richmond. Now, all around Richmond, there are these little towns. So you have to go through one of the little towns in order to get to Richmond. I mean, that's just how it works. So Robert E. Lee has scraped together like the bottom of the barrel here. Anything that he can get, basically to defend Richmond. All right, he's really running low on troops. He doesn't nearly have the troops that the North does. But what the benefit is he knows all these guys. When he finds out they put Burnside in charge, he's like, they put Burnside in charge? You got to be kidding me. That guy's a moron. He's like, but all right, whatever. So Burnside, all right, and it doesn't really negatively impact him at first because Burnside has been told to march directly to Richmond. Well, that's what Burnside's going to do. So the town he's going to go through, which is directly before you get to Richmond, is a town called Frericksburg. I don't know why I sit here and start writing. Like, I am not going to finish writing Frericksburg. So, you know what? I'm just not going to do it. All right. It's Frericksburg. All right. It's in your notes. You can see it. So, Frericksburg is right here. Now, Lee goes knowing, because Lee knows everything. He knows everything these guys are going to do before they do it. He knows that Burnside's going to come through Frericksburg, so he goes and barricades himself at Frericksburg at the top of a hill. Now, after Lee's dug in, he's actually a little concerned, mainly because he's dug in too good. So here's what Lee sees. So Lee's at the top of a hill. He has his men right here in front of him, all right? And there's like a stone wall, no relation to Stonewall Jackson. There's a stone wall in front of him, and then there's a very steep hill that's like 300 yards, almost straight down, and there's a creek at the bottom, all right? And when I say a creek, it's not a river, but it's like you would need a bridge to get over it, and there is no bridge down there. Then on the other side of it, there is like 3/4 of a mile wide open field, and then the woods way off in the distance. Lee's like, man, I think we're dug in too good, because you'd have to be a complete moron to attack us right here because we have the advantage, like drastically. Then Burnside shows up. Burnside walks in. So what Burnside sees when he walks out into this field, 3/4 of a mile wide open field, a basically creek river where you have to build a bridge at, all right, to cross it. Once you get across, it's 300 yards, like straight uphill, and then the entire Confederate army is at the top of the hill, all right? So the reason I call Burnside a moron, all right, and I feel pretty confident that I can't get, like, people can't get super offended over this, all right? Because the textbook pretty much calls him a moron. Now, the textbook has a little bit more class than Mr. Wagstaff does, calling him a moron. Here's what the textbook actually says about General Burnside at the Battle of Frericksburg. It says, Frederick Burnside decided that he was going to try to surprise Lee with a full frontal attack. Period. The next sentence is, Lee was surprised by Burnside by his poor strategic decision to attack straight on. This is them saying, like, this is the dumbest thing that has happened in warfare. So Burnside gets there and he sees this and he's like, all right, guys, attack. Like, and just sends his troops across this field at Frericksburg. So Lee watches these men just storm across this field. Cannon fire just takes off, just boom, 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 boom. They're just shooting at them. It's like Antietam almost. These guys are just getting wiped out left and right as they're coming across this field. They spend all day coming across the field. When they get across the field, which they do because they have so many men under Burnside, they get to this river. They have to build a bridge. And while they're building a bridge, there's guys up top shooting down. They're like, pow, pow, pow. Like, that's a hostile work environment. Building a bridge when people above you are shooting you. There's so many men for Burnside, they literally build a bridge. They actually complete a bridge in this battle. Burnside's men then go across the bridge and are having to like climb up this hill to get to the Confederates. The Confederates run out of ammunition, but they come prepared. They have big piles of rocks lined up next to them, and they're taking the rocks and just smashing the Union soldiers as they're coming up the hill. Most of these soldiers deserted, just ran off. They're like, this is the dumbest thing ever. I'm not going to do it. And then they never make it to the top of the hill before it is a complete... Burnside's like, okay, I guess I not win. I go home now. And just like turns around and leaves. And there's just like dead bodies all over the field. And Battle of Frericksburg, it was a direct assault. And it is a massive, massive failure. This is supposed to be a painting of the Battle of Frericksburg of just the herds of men trying to climb up this hill, and it was an absolute, complete, and total fiasco. All right? So, brings us back. Let me make myself smaller here. Lincoln, he's like, you have got to be kidding. What? And he's like, what did you do? And Burnside just keeps walking, like realizes he's off the team. He's like, I'm fired. He's like, that's right, you're fired. Fired. You're fired. All right. So he's like, this is ridiculous. He goes, how can I not get a competent general? So he looks at what he has left. He's got coward and crazy dude. Now, crazy dude's over here. Well, I can't tell you what crazy dude is doing at the end of the bench because it's illegal in all 50 states today. It's just absolutely horrific, and it's awful, and it's disgusting. And Lincoln is horrified that this man exists. He's like, what is wrong with you? No, crazy dude's like, this is my crazy dude impersonation. So Lincoln's like, okay. Well, I guess I don't really have a choice here. Coward, come on in. Coward's name is General Joseph Hooker. All right. This is a picture of Joseph Hooker. Now, in class, whenever I say his name is Joseph Hooker, people started giggling. His last name is Hooker. And for the first like 3 or 4 years I was teaching, I'd be like, all right, guys, listen. Like, we've got to be mature in here. Like, I know his last name's Hooker, but, be mature. And one of the reasons that never struck me as funny is I actually grew up and 2 of my good friends that were brothers whose last name was Hooker. And, I mean, if the name itself isn't comical because it was originally made for, I guess, for like fishers. Like when they make last names, whatever. But everybody giggles like, his name's Hooker. Well, after a few years, I learned, and this is actually crazy, that the term hooker, his last name, as being a slang term for a prostitute, is actually connected to this guy, General Joseph Hooker. All right. So General Hooker in the Civil War, to keep his soldiers' morale up, all right, he allowed prostitutes to travel with his army. All right. Needless to say, his army constantly had to deal with sicknesses from like syphilis and chlamydia and massive other issues that this brings along. But General Hooker was known to allow prostitutes to travel with his soldiers. Because of this, those prostitutes were referred to as hookers' ladies, and the term hookers actually is still today used as a slang term for prostitutes that apparently came from the American Civil War. So prior to the 1860s, the term hooker didn't mean anything. Only after that does the term be associated with prostitutes. So I learned that, and random piece of information for you. All right. So General Hooker says, "My plans are perfect. May God have mercy on General Lee, for I will have none." All right. Tough talk by a guy who not going to be that tough. All right. So General Hooker, his goal, just like everybody else's goal, is to come in here and take over Richmond. Now, just like everybody else, as we had talked about, surrounding Richmond are these towns. So you got to go through one of these towns. Burnside had tried to come in here through Frericksburg, this one. All right. That didn't work out. So what Hooker is going to try to do, all right, is he's going to try to be sneaky. He is terrified of Lee. Terrified of him. And at this point, you got to kind of understand, he's like 10 steps ahead of him. So when Lee finds out that Hooker's in charge, he goes, I know exactly what he's going to try to do. So he tries to be super sneaky. Hooker does, and sneak all the way around. He's sneaking through the woods, right? So he's going to stay in the woods so Lee doesn't know where he is. So he spends weeks sneaking through the woods into the south. And he is going to try to sneak out here on the side, all right, and go in through this little town here called Chancelorsville, all right? So he sneaks for weeks so that Lee doesn't know where he is. Sneaky, 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 sneaky. And then he steps out of the woods. Guess who's on top of the hill at Chancelorsville just looking at him? Lee. Lee knows exactly what everybody's going to do. And Lee's like, "What's up?" And then Hooker just runs back into the woods. And Lee's like, "Hooker, I know you're in there." And General Hooker's like, "No, I'm not." And Lee's like, "I can hear you. You're talking to me. Come out here and fight." And General Hooker's like, "I'm not here." So General Hooker refuses to come out of the woods to fight Lee. This is why I nickname him the coward in my lineup. He refuses to come out to fight Lee. Just refuses. Flat refuses. So Lee is like, "All right, here's what we're going to do." All right. So Lee, and his right-hand man is still Stonewall Jackson. Lee is going to send Jackson around behind Hooker in the woods and basically scare Hooker out of the woods. I put a little J here for Jackson. All right. Is going to scare Hooker out of the woods, force him out into the field so that they can fight and Lee can win. Because Lee feels very confident at this point. He has the advantage. But Hooker refuses to come out of the woods. So Stonewall Jackson, all right, he is going to sneak through the woods, and he's got a few thousand men with him, to basically scare Hooker out of the woods into the field. So Jackson takes his men, and Jackson's a guy, he's a hands-on guy. So he's sneaking through the woods, doing exactly what this plan is, all right? It has gotten dark, it's nighttime. So Jackson is sneaking through the woods with his men. So hopefully right at sunrise, they can scare Hooker out into the field, and Lee can fight him and beat him. So as Jackson is sneaking through the woods here, all right, it is pitch black. So what they do with these thousands of men is you always have a scout that runs out ahead, scouts about, a mile ahead, and then comes back and lets you know if you've seen any bad guys. Well, Jackson is so hands-on, sometimes he was the scout that would run out and come back. So as they're inching through the woods in the middle of the night, Jackson, it is his turn to be the scout. I mean, he volunteers to do it. He's a hands-on guy. So Jackson rolls out ahead and actually sees where the camp is for Hooker. So Jackson comes racing back into camp to let his men know what's taking place. Now here's what happened. When Jackson left, the scouts that were standing guard, it was shift change. So those two guys get replaced. So two other guys come up and they're like, all right, we got you. And the guy's like, all right, that's fine. And the two guys that were on duty when Jackson left leave. They don't inform the two new guys that Jackson is out. So they don't think anybody's outside of camp. So these two new guys are sitting here, and about 10 minutes into their shift, here comes a horse racing through the woods in the middle of the night at their camp. And the two guards open fire and shoot the rider, which is Stonewall Jackson. Stonewall Jackson gets killed by his own men. Now, he actually dies like 2 days later. Not that it really matters the story, but Stonewall Jackson gets killed at the Battle of Chancelorsville by his own men. It doesn't stop the plan. The plan actually runs perfectly because they do know where they are. The next day, it runs exactly how the South wants it to. Jackson's men still force Hooker out into the field. Lee wipes out Hooker's men, and Hooker runs back to Abraham Lincoln a loser. All right. But the big downside at Chancelorsville is that Lee has lost his right-hand man, and that is going to be extremely detrimental to Lee moving forward. All right, because having somebody you can depend on that's going to follow orders right when you tell them how to do it is a value that is a struggle to find. All right, this is a painting of the Battle of Chancelorsville. This is supposed to be Jackson's men sneaking through the woods. Clearly, this is a little inaccurate because it happened at night, and this is clearly during the day, but you can't just paint a whole big black canvas and be like, Battle of Chancelorsville, and expect to make any money. But this is supposed to symbolize Jackson's men sneaking through the woods. Well, Hooker lost. All right, here we are. Let me put myself down here smaller. Right here on Lincoln. Oh, General Hooker lost. Lincoln, not happy. So, guess what happens to old Hooker? Fired. All right? Oh, so Lincoln's like, what am I going to do? So he's looking up and down his bench. Keep in mind this whole time, Ulysses S. Grant, he's been wrecking shop here in the West, and we'll talk about him in future lessons. Fired. Not available. And the crazy guy, is it my turn? Thank goodness for the internet. Apparently the Face app can do this, and I literally had to fight back tears when I found it. So crazy dude's like, this is my turn, and Lincoln's like, no, and he's like, oh, well, gee whiz. Sorry, I'm gonna not laugh at my own jokes. All right. So, but honestly, at this point, you don't have any options. All right. And Lincoln he's just so concerned. He doesn't know what to do. So it's just a big question. Lincoln doesn't know who to put in charge here. Like, it's just, he's like, you know what? How about we just get troops together? We train them. I don't know what to do. So at this point, Lincoln is just exhausted. He just doesn't know what to do. So that's where we are here in the East. In the West, Ulysses S. Grant's doing work. Here in the East, Lincoln doesn't really think he has any viable option to put in charge here. So, while Lincoln is just putting an army together, something happens that's referred to today as Gettysburg. It is a brutal battle. Let me get to a map here. And that picture is, anyway. All right. Here's what happens, what is famously known as the Battle of Gettysburg. You got Washington, D.C. right here. All right. You have Philadelphia, which is right here. All right. And you have Richmond, which is here. All right. So Lee, all right, here's Lee. He's just been down here defending Richmond. He realizes the North is just going to keep sending army after army after army. The North can replace all their soldiers. All right. They're getting freed slaves in their army. They're getting immigrants in their army. The South has a finite, like a certain limited number of troops. He can't sit here and wait. He has to get England and France involved. The only way to do that is to prove to them that they can win the war without their help. And Lincoln and Lee thinks he can do this by taking over Philadelphia. Even though the North has passed the Emancipation Proclamation, Lee's like, surely England and France can see through that was just an empty statement. They never actually did anything about slavery. There's really no moral superiority here. So Lee is going to march north and try to get to Philadelphia one more time. All right, he's going to march north. Now, Lee actually is able to get all the way past Washington, D.C. Nobody knows he's there. This is he's got like 40,000 troops. This is the last group that he has. He goes further, 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 further. He actually makes it all the way through Maryland and gets to Pennsylvania. They have no idea here that Lee is on the march. He's already completely passed them. All right. He is about a day's march from making it to Philadelphia. All right. Everything is going good. Well, Lee's men are struggling, like big time. They don't have the supplies. So once they make it into the north and they're like past the danger zone here, a lot of Lee's men are like, hey, General Lee, we need shoes. We need supplies. Can we go raid one of these many warehouses the North has around here so we can get supplies? And Lee says, absolutely not. Do not at all do that. The reason I don't want you to do that is because we need to take over Philadelphia. Once we take over Philadelphia, you can have whatever you want. But I don't want to like lose our surprise. All right. So he says no. Well, there's a couple guys here, about 5 guys, we'll say, going to bed, and their feet are jacked up from just really bad shoes. They realize there's a little town right here called Gettysburg. I'll do that one in black right here. So this little town right here called Gettysburg. And when I say it's a town, it's basically 2 roads. Beep, beep, not drawn to scale. There's like 2 roads that intersect, and you got like 4 buildings. Boop, 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 boop. However, this building right here is a warehouse filled with shoes. And the men know it. So they're like, you know what I'm just going to do? I am going to hop over here and I am going to grab some shoes from this warehouse and be back before sunrise. So a handful of guys decide to sneak out of camp and go to this little town called Gettysburg, which is really supposed to be deserted and nobody's there. As these guys roll into town this way, just so happens they're walking down like the one deserted street. From the other side of the street, walking in, is like 5 or 6 Union troops. Well, Union troops and Confederate troops see each other. Guess what they start doing? They open fire at each other. All right. What Lincoln doesn't realize, or keep saying Lee is Lincoln. What Lee doesn't realize is there is a massive army that had come down the night before, and they're on their way down here to Washington, D.C., but they have camped on the other side of Gettysburg. So Lee was here on this side of Gettysburg, and that big army is here on the other side of Gettysburg. When they start shooting at each other, this whole army comes this way to see what the matter is, and then Lee and his army come over this way to see what's up. This is a massive, massive battle. This is the game changer right here. One of the big things here that you need to understand is this is the first battle that Lee's going to be involved in that he wasn't prepared for, that he wasn't expecting because this snuck up on him. Now, Lee does all he can, but he is vastly outnumbered. There's no actual like head general here for the North that you need to know. So vicious fighting takes place here in Gettysburg. Lee can't retreat. He just cannot. He can't cut and run. And first off, he's so far behind lines, he'd have to like make it past Washington, D.C. Can't do that with his army. This is also his last legit army, and he knows it. This is his last chance. He has to win here at Gettysburg. If he can defeat this army, all right, if he can wipe out this big old army here, there's nobody that can stop him from taking Philadelphia. If he takes over Philadelphia, England and France may get involved, and the South could win the Civil War. Lee knows this when the battle starts, because this is the only people that can stop you. So a huge battle takes place here, all right? So with Stonewall Jackson having died, his new second in command is a guy named Longstreet. So there is a hill in Gettysburg called Little Round Top. Probably one of the most famous hills, that and Bunker Hill. One of the most famous hills in American history. Whoever takes over this little hill in Gettysburg will probably win this battle. Whoever wins this battle will probably win the Civil War and change the course of history. Lee looks at Longstreet and says, Longstreet, go take over Little Round Top. Longstreet doesn't. He's like, I'll do it in the morning, first thing in the morning. So in the morning when he wakes up, Longstreet's getting ready to take over Little Round Top. Well, in the middle of the night, the Union soldiers had taken over Little Round Top. Lee is furious. He's like, Longstreet, I told you to take it over. And Longstreet's like, okay, we're going to get it. And Lee says, you absolutely will take it over. So Longstreet's like, okay. So the next day, Longstreet looks at the generals below him, all right, and says, we are going to take over this hill today if it kills us. Something along those lines, all right? He was speaking figuratively. Well, the soldiers don't, the generals don't think he's talking figuratively and think he means charge now. Famous turning point in the entire Civil War here at Gettysburg on day 3. It's called Pickett's Charge because General Pickett gets all the blame for this and it's kind of unfair. He is going to take 15,000 men and charge across a wide open field, Burnside style, at a well-entrenched Union army. They all get slaughtered in this field on a single day. I imagine Lee is watching this happen in slow motion because this is a dumb decision to just charge this hill. And as Lee sees it, it's like slow motion and Lee's like, no. And like everybody's like, it just absolutely annihilates Lee's army here at Gettysburg. And Lee is able to turn around and escape back down south himself, but his entire army gets left up here because they're dead. And he races back down to Richmond. This is a major turning point. Everybody knows at this point, Lee will never be able to have an army big enough to go take Philadelphia again. There is no way Lee can win this war. All Lee can do is just hold off as long as he can. Right? He has no more strategy of winning. And Lee knows this. He's like, all right, I'll keep defending the South, but yeah, my entire game plan for how we're going to win this, I just don't see how we're going to win it after this. 57,000 Americans died at Gettysburg. It's the most brutal war we've ever fought. Keep in mind, 5,000 died over 10 years in the war in Iraq. 5,000. 57,000 died in one itty bitty town in 3 days in the American Civil War. It is horrifying to the rest of the country after Gettysburg of just the horrificness. But it was all that they could do at that point. So this is a photograph of Longstreet. And this is Longstreet saying, I've been a soldier all my life. I've commanded companies. I've commanded regiments. I've commanded divisions. And I've commanded even more. But there are no 15,000 men in the world that can go across that ground. This is Longstreet kind of defending himself, and rightfully so, because Pickett thought he was being told by Longstreet to do it. Longstreet's just saying here, I knew he couldn't do it. Like I was talking figuratively. Like I knew nobody could make it across that ground. Like that's murderer's row. But Longstreet, it makes you wonder, had Jackson still been there? Could they have taken Little Round Top on day 1? Could they have turned the tide of the entire war? Like these are the turning points in American history. In these couple days, in these actions by a few men, how drastically different could society have been present day had things gone differently? This is just a screenshot of Gettysburg. It is the bloodiest battle in the history of America. All right, that's as far as we're going to get today. I'll see you guys tomorrow.